Hey folks, before we get started, I just want to let you know about my upcoming book, The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job. If you're looking for a job or you think you might be looking for a job in the future and you're trying to up your mobility and meet new people and things like that, this book walks you through the whole process. Go ahead and check it out. It comes out on November 20th. It'll be on Amazon, and you can find it as The Max Coder's Guide to Finding Your Dream Developer Job.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Adventures in .NET. I'm your host, Sean Clabo, and with me today on the panel is Caleb Wells from Typhon Group.
Hey,
Caleb, hey, how's it been?
good. You?
Good. You missed last week, so hope you had a good time.
Yeah. Took a little vacation.
Oh, nice. So what we're going to be talking about today is a little thing called Simmy and chaos engineering, and our guest to talk about that is Geovanny Sandoval. Say hi, Geovanny.
Hi, guys. How you doing?
Hey.
Good.
Nice.
Glad to have you.
The thing that I believe most about top-notch developers is that they're constantly learning. Whether you're out watching videos, whether you're reading blog posts or books, whether you're out writing open source software, you're always out there learning how to be a better developer. And my friends at Thinkster and I teamed up and we put together a show called the Dev Ed Podcast. You can find it at devedpodcast.com. It's run by Joe Eames, who you might know from JavaScript Jabber, Adventures in Angular, and Views on Vue. And they have terrific conversations about what it means to become a better developer, to learn how to do development, and the ways that you can learn. So if you're looking for inspiration and ideas about how you can do better and learn better as a developer, then go check out the Dev Ed Podcast.
So tell us a little about yourself, what you do, where you work, those kind of things.
Sure. I'm a software engineer from Medellin, Colombia. I've worked for more than 11 years as a developer, technical lead, architect. Currently, I work for a New York company called Stellar Employ. Actually, I work remotely because I'm based here in Medellin. So also, I love contributing to the community. For example, writing in my blog, mostly about Microsoft technologies. I'm a co-organizer of the .NET community here in Medellin. I drive in Simmy right now, the project Simmy.
Okay. So what is Project Simmy?
Well, Simmy is a chaos engineering tool based on the idea of the Netflix Simian Army, Yeah. Also, it's based on Poly. Actually, I would say that Simmy is like a child of Poly.
So what is chaos engineering and what is poly for those who don't know?
Yeah, good question. Actually, I really like a definition from Gremlin that sometime I saw. I really like to think in chaos engineering like a vaccine that you inject yourself with a bit of a potentially virus in order to prevent illness. So say that chaos engineering is a philosophy which provides you tools to build such an immunity in our systems by injecting chaos, like, for example, injecting faults, injecting latency, CPU failures, etc.
It's intentionally breaking things, right?
Exactly. It's all about intentionally breaking things, in order to find out potentially weaknesses in your system and then fix them before they become in outages,
Yeah. And so what is poly? You said it's kind of like the parent of Simmy, so to speak.
Yeah, Poly is the best tool for to build resilient strategies in the .NET ecosystems. So Poly provides you policies, for example, fallback policies, retry, wait, and all head isolation, and a lot of tools and APIs to build resilience strategies in order to build resilient systems, So actually, Simmy is based on Poly because at the end of the day, our monkey policies are a policy itself.
Mm-hmm. Got you. So with Poly and the policies that you create from that, with normal.NET and maybe a web API call, right? When you go in, if you have an issue, that falls into the catch and you return an exception, it's a one-time deal. With Poly, it'll actually try that same process the number of times that you specify based on your policy. And then if it still can't do it, that's when you get the exception. Is that the case?
Exactly, yeah.
So Simmy builds on that and actually forces the exception after Poly does its thing.
Actually, before you start to try to inject in some chaos, I would say that the first step is you need to have in place your resilient strategy. For example, something like, as you're saying, say you're going to consume external API. So you might to retry, for example, 3 times if something goes wrong. Then, for example, you might want to try a fallback in case, for example, I don't know, putting that request in a queue or something like that. So first thing is that create your resilience strategy. I would say a second step before trying to inject chaos in your system, I would say is that ideally you have to have in place a good monitoring strategy or tool, because you need to watch and observe your system and the behavior of your system in order to be aware easily where is the weaknesses in your system. Then I think you're ready to try and start making some experiments, injecting chaos in your system. For example, speaking about that, in that case that you're consuming an external API, it might interesting, for example, simulate a bad request. So, for example, you can tell Simmy, hey, Simmy, I want to simulate a bad request calling this API. So Simmy is going to inject that result, a bad request. Then you're going to be able to try if your resilience strategy around that call of that API is working fine or not. And that's why I say that it's important you have the resilience strategy in place and also monitoring strategy and tools in place in order to see how the system behaves under that behavior,
Okay.
Are Poly and Simmy both based around .NET? That's what they're used for?
Yeah, Poly and Simmy is around the .NET ecosystem.
And it can be used for either .NET web applications, desktop, whatever you need?
Yeah, actually, Simmy, as far as I remember, supports .NET Standard 1.6, .NET Standard 2.0, and also we're going to support the new .NET Standard 2.1.
Can it be used for full framework?
Yeah.
Okay, just make sure there. So what's kind of the hello world, the first thing that somebody might do with Simmy and trying to use some chaos engineering in their setup?
Yeah, actually, we got several examples in the repo. You can find them in the main repo on GitHub. We have an example, as you say, the hello world example, which is pretty basic, and it shows an approach to using Simmy, injecting exceptions, any kind of exception, injecting, for example, HTTP response messages as false in a dynamic manner without to, for example, restart the application. Just a matter of updating a configuration file. That in that case is an app settings file, And also we have another couple of examples, more advanced and more real life, For example, we have an example that shows an approach to how to use Simmy in a distributed architecture. So in that example, we're using Azure SQL databases, Docker, Service Fabric. In that example, it shows an approach to how to configure your chaos dynamically. And also it shows an example about how you can inject, for example, even a custom behavior, whatever you need. In that case, is an example of how you can restart or stop nodes or instances in your cluster.
So right now, Simmy offers 3 types of policies, right? Fault, latency, and behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Is behavior more of a catch-all outside of the other 2? Can you give us an example of a behavior? Exactly, what you would put in there to make it fail?
Yeah, for sure. Imagine that you need to inject a very custom behavior as in your system to make some chaos. So I would say, for example, updating a table in your database, for example, or it would say stop an instance, a virtual machines in Azure,
Gotcha.
So that's why we created the behavior monkey to that cases, very custom cases. Because, for example, with the fault monkey or fault policy, you can inject not only exceptions, let's say a general exception or out of argument, I don't know, exception, whatever, but you can inject any result as an exception or your custom exceptions.
Okay.
So as I said earlier, you can treat, for example, an HTTP response message as an exception. You can tell Simmy that. Also, we have another monkey, which is for insert latency as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Does it work like a mocking framework, or is it middleware? How does it get itself into your system?
Yeah, that's a good question because that was one of the original ideas. And actually, we have that idea in our to-do list because Simmy is able not only to inject chaos in their system and simulate chaos, but it's going to be useful also for mocking or for testing purposes. So we have in mind in the near future, I think, write some syntax or some APIs to let the consumers using Simmy for unit test purposes as well. Because as you said, you can mock easily any kind of dependencies.
So right now, it's an extra layer on top of Poly, and Poly is for your production environment. I'm assuming that, well, I know in Netflix's case, right, they inject stuff randomly to make things fail and test stuff out. Is Simmy doing the same thing in a production environment, or would that be something that you would actually trigger in your, dev or QA environments?
Well, actually, you can inject or set up Simmy in whatever environment you need. Of course, the ideal is when you feel confidence enough about your resilience strategy or your monitoring strategy, you could start making experiments in a production environment. But for example, in your startup class, you can set up Simmy. For example, if the environment is production, set up Simmy, or if environment is staging, set up Simmy. It's up to you, actually.
Okay.
I just want to clarify something about Simmy that I think is important before we move on. That all chaos policies, fault policy, latency, and behavior policy, are designed to inject chaos randomly. So a monkey policy allows you to specify an injection rate between 0 and 100%. So the higher is the injection rate, the higher is the probability to inject the chaos. Also, it allows you to specify whether or not the random injection is enabled. So that way you can release or hold the monkeys regardless of the injection rate you specify. It means if you specify an injection rate of 100%, but you tell to the policy that the random injection is disabled, it will do nothing. So that's led you to inject the chaos in a very dynamic way.
Okay. In that case, you can target, like you said, different environments if you wanted to really do some testing against dev, but not have it running necessarily in production unless you're confident that your resiliency is in place. Okay.
Exactly. Actually, now that you mentioned target, you can inject chaos in a targeted manner as well, using, for example, the context. So using the context for inject the chaos, you can control the chaos, for example, in a targeted manner. For example, by tagging your policy executions with a context operation key and introducing chaos targeting particular target operation. For example, you might want to inject only chaos in one method in one of your controllers, but just there, not the whole controller. Or for example, you might want to inject chaos in your data layer, for example, in the whole data layer, but you might want to inject different type of chaos. For example, when you insert something or you update something in your database, or probably you might want to inject a different chaos frame. For example, kind of latency when you're trying to perform a select or when you're trying to get something from your database. So Simmy allows you to do that, to inject the chaos in a targeted and in a controlled manner as well.
Okay.
I can just imagine what it would be like to push that button to turn on, Simmy in production for the very first time. I just see my blood pressure would just go through the roof going, I'm going to hit this button. I hope it goes the way I want it to be. And go. And it's like, oh my.
My boss would have a heart attack.
Exactly. Yeah. Hey, boss, we're going to intentionally try to break things in production. Is that okay with you?
These things about chaos engineering is kind disruptive because, as you say, it's like kind of crazy try to break things in a production environment on purpose, But actually, yeah,
it makes sense, right?
Yeah,
especially like, for instance, with a company like Netflix, you need to have that resiliency, that testing in place. Like you said, the fallback external API, or if you continue getting bad requests here, right, you may load a more slimmed down UI or provide them with information you have at the time, that kind of stuff. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it has even more sense nowadays with all of these trends about microservices, because
yes,
testing out an architecture, a distributed architecture system with a distributed architecture is really, really difficult because you can't cover all the cases only with unit tests or integration tests, So that's why chaos engineering is so important nowadays in that matter, in distributed architectures.
We've got a couple of links from the Poly project that we'll add to the show notes. One of them that I'm curious about is on actually implementing Simmy in your Azure app. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I find very, very useful Azure app configuration as a chaos store of settings, because you can use Azure app configuration to store your chaos settings. Azure app configuration provides you almost in real time. I mean, an update in real time. For example, if you update your settings in storing Azure app configuration then will be to notify all the clients using that configuration. Because think about this scenario. For example, if you have stored your chaos settings, say in the conventional app settings file. So if you have deployed your application as a containers, so we're gonna end up with a lot of thousands of containers. So trying to update all the configuration, all the settings in all the containers would be a mess. So instead of that, you have your settings in one place, centralized in one place. In this case, will be Azure app configuration.
Okay.
And once you update some setting, for example, if you want to enable the chaos, it's just matter of update that setting in Azure app configuration, and that's it. Almost in real time, you're gonna have the chaos enabled in your system. So I found very, very useful Azure app configuration for that purpose.
When I first started taking computer science classes in college, I thought programming was just a joke. In fact, I changed my major over to engineering and started doing computer engineering and chip design. Then I found Ruby and I fell in love. I love Ruby. It was my first real programming language where I dove deep and really learned how to make software that makes a difference for other people. Since then, and the way that we got started with devchat.tv, we started a show called Ruby Rogues. It's currently in the 400s of episodes. We've talked to hundreds of people in the Ruby community, about the Ruby programming language, about Rails, and about what makes good programming. So if you're interested in Ruby Rogues, or you just want to hear a long series of experienced programmers talking about real problems, then go check out rubyrogues.com.
We're prototyping some stuff in Azure right now, or proof of concepts, testing things out. And I definitely like how the configuration is set up for Azure apps or even for Key Vault, right? So you don't have to manage or keep all that stuff either in Secret Manager or in your repo code. You set it up in Azure and it's managed that way. And so you set it up once and you're good to go. And that makes sense if you wanted to be able to turn it off and on. You don't have to do another build or another deployment. So, okay, cool.
Yeah, actually imagine that, for example, you just released a new version of your application.
Right.
So you might want to enable the chaos, say, for the next 30 minutes in order to make sure that release is going to work fine. So you can, for example, enable the chaos just after of that deployment. So it will be super helpful for that.
So I was just wondering, do you know if there's many large companies that are actually, have Simmy in place and are using it to?
Well, I don't know for sure about that, but I know that some guys, for example, in UK, also in Brazil, are starting to talk about Simmy in their local communities. Also, I know, for example, that Brian Hogan has written a blog post series about Simmy. I did a talk about Simmy recently here in Medellin, in a local community, and it was fantastic to see the people's reaction when they saw Simmy in action, So, but I'm not sure if there are already companies using Simmy. I hope, but I don't know. But I think that's the idea, because I feel that the community around Simmy is starting to grow, and it's amazing. But what I know is that all of the biggest companies out there take care about chaos engineering. So I know, for example, all we know that the Netflix, of course, Microsoft, Uber, LinkedIn, all those big companies take care about chaos engineering.
Yeah, I know Netflix really does some crazy things. I think their engineers will just walk around and pull wires and plugs just randomly, things like that. So that just seems crazy to me. So you talked about the community. So tell us a little more about that. Is it fairly good size? Is it growing?
Yeah, it's fantastic because Simmy is still, a kind of brand new tool for chaos engineering. But I think one of the reasons could be because of the lack of chaos engineering tool into the .NET ecosystem. Also because of the support of Poly, because all the people out there knows that Poly is a great tool, has
Absolutely.
a great support,
Yeah.
So that's great, count on with the support of Poly. So yeah, I feel that Simmy community has been starting to grow, because, as I said, people are starting to writing blog posts about that. Also, in the Poly Slacks, there are people that ask for good practices around Simmy, how to use Simmy. So it's great, and I'm glad because of that, because Simmy is still, as I say, a brand new tool. So yeah, that's fantastic.
How old is Simmy? How long have you been working on it?
We started to work on Simmy last year.
Okay.
I think, at September, October. But we released Simmy like in June, I think. So It's pretty young.
Yeah, it's new.
Yeah.
So is it open source?
Yeah, it's completely open source. You can find the repo and the code in GitHub under the Polycontrib organization. And also,
we'll add a link.
okay.
Yeah,
Also,
to the show notes.
let me say that, because not only Simmy community is starting to grow, but also polycontrib organization, because polycontrib organization encourage people, to contribute around poly, So, for example, I realized that Microsoft Teams team is going to contribute with a custom cache policy that they built for their needs. So it's going to be a new project in poly contrib organization.
Cool.
Actually, yesterday I saw that a guy said that he wrote a custom head policy. So probably it's going to be a new project also into the poly country organization.
No, I think that's great. Poly's a solid open source tool. So I think it's good that you're able to build on top of it. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It looks like the mascot for Simmy is a pirate monkey.
Yeah.
Where'd that come from?
That come from because of the idea of the Simian army. So
right. Okay, got you. Yeah.
Yeah. So the pirate monkey. It's like, you remember that monkey of the Pirates of the Caribbean? I
yes.
Think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like that, because our idea was we wanted to say that Simmy is a kind of crazy monkey that when you release it could do, chaos, serious chaos.
So are most of the functions there the functionality that you want it to have, or are you still building on that? A lot of things to add. What's the future of Simmy?
Yeah, actually, right now I'm working in a pull request because we wanted to build a new syntax, which is gonna allow Simmy to grow easily, because we wanted to avoid the proliferation of overloads. That's, by the way, it was a problem that Dylan is the architect of Poly,
Okay.
It's a problem that Dylan realized. And right now, if you want to add, for example, a new parameter, it's gonna implies a new overload in order to keep supporting the old syntax, supporting the new overload. So we wanted to avoid that, and I working in a new syntax that is going to be, I think, more intuitive and easier to use for the consumers. It's basically like all the .NET API syntax work. For example, receiving an action of an options object, making with building the builder pattern, you can build your policy. So I'm working on that. Actually, I think I will be able to release in the next couple of weeks. And also I have in mind a couple of extensions or new policies that I think is going to be very useful. For example, I have in mind an extension that will be able to restart or stop instances in Azure, in order to offer that like a built-in or out-of-the-box feature with Simmy, as, for example, Netflix Simian Army does with Amazon. So I think it's going to be pretty useful, because I think that's a common need when it comes to inject chaos, because playing around with instances in the cluster is very, very common when it comes to inject chaos in a distributed system. So I think it will be very nice to have that out of the box. Actually, as I said earlier, you can do that using the behavior monkey that we already offer. But as I said, I think it's better when you just grab some NuGet package that already do that and just set it up and using it. Also, I have in mind another extension to inject traffic, basically. I think will be very useful not only to test out, for example, the throttling or the rate limiting in our APIs, but also to test out if we're ready to, for example, a DDoS attack. So I think it's going to be very interesting trying to inject that kind of chaos.
So one of your graphics, you have a watch monkey that looks like you're doing, it's an Azure function. Is that something that's part of Simmy, or is that something that you implemented as an example? Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question, because that was just an approach that one of many things you can do with Simmy. I mean, right now it's not something built in with Simmy, but in that example, I just showed an approach how to automate the chaos. So I just built an azure function that was watching the chaos settings. Let's say, for example, a master off button to turn on or turn off the chaos. So in that case, that azure function is watching that if the chaos is enabled, to release the monkeys or hold the monkeys automatically, also to allow you or to show you how to automate the chaos, for example, for any period of time or window of time. For example, you might want to only enable chaos, say that midnight, I don't know, or maybe depending on a region, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just an approach that I built in order to show how you can automate the chaos injection using Simmy, taking advantage of other tools that we have in the Microsoft ecosystem.
Okay, cool.
So what kind of things haven't we covered about Simmy and Poly and just in general about chaos engineering that would be interesting for our listeners?
Well, I would say just a brief history about how Simmy was born. I was working on building a resilient strategy for consuming Azure SQL databases in the company I used to work for by that time. So I was using Poly a lot. I was amazed with that project because it was a great, and it is a great project and very easy to use. So ever since I got interested in the project, I wanted to contribute somehow with the project, So I started to watching the repo on GitHub. And someday I saw an issue created by Minhas that, by the way, Minhas was the one that got the original idea about Simmy together with Dylan. By that time, Minhas was working at Microsoft. I think right now he works at Google. But anyways, that's the history, the story around behind Simmy. So I remember that I started to writing the latency monkey, and I ended up writing a lot of code, writing the documentation, a lot of stuff, and here I am driving Simmy now.
That's awesome.
It was funny, and it was a really, really a great journey for me, and funny as well, because I've learned tons from Poly and also from Dylan.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, if that's all we kind of got for learning about Poly and Simmy and chaos engineering, I thought it was really interesting. I hope some of the listeners can pick up on some of this and maybe look at chaos into their applications to make it more stable and more robust.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, good.
One of the things that I find that we talk a lot about at the different conferences and the different things that I'm working on is open source software. And a lot of people have a lot of ideas around open source software, but we don't often think about the people who are building it and trying to maintain it. I had a friend, John, who came to me. He's been a guest on JavaScript Jabber a couple of times. He came and he actually said, "Hey, Chuck, I wish there was a show about sustaining open source." That really hit me where I live. And I have a few other friends who are working on projects related to this. So we all got together and we put together a show called Sustain Our Software. You can find it at sustainoursoftwarepodcast.com. It's a place where several people who are passionate about open source come together and have conversations about how it can be sustained and how it can be maintained and what we can do to help these maintainers continue to deliver us value that we build our software on. Most of the software we're building is based on open source, and so it's important to us to have that maintained and have it taken care of. Come check it out. It's been really interesting to listen to the conversations that they're having from people who are working in it all the time and just hear what they have to say about it. Once again, that's at sustainoursoftwarepodcast.com.
I guess we should probably move on to picks then.
All right.
Everybody
Sounds
ready?
good.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I'll go first this week.
Okay.
And my pick is adaptive cards for Blazor. And I don't know if you know what adaptive cards are, but adaptive cards are a way to exchange content in a common and consistent way. So it can exchange basically rich snippets with UI between all sorts of platforms and applications. So you can write kind of like almost like a component and have it embedded in things like Teams or Outlook, or even in other platforms like Android, iOS, and React, or any of that kind of stuff. So they just came out with a version of that, so you can use Blazor to make your adaptive cards. So if you want to do something like that, check it out.
Okay.
All right.
My pick for this week is another Nintendo Switch deal. Yeah. This is actually a website called dekudeals.com. We'll add a link to the show notes. I'm curious about sales they're doing, or, when a game I'm interested in has a big discount. And I used to get on Reddit, and there's a couple of pages there and you could track stuff. But this website actually is pulling in feeds from all the major retailers as well as Nintendo's eShop. You can create an account there and select the games that you're interested in. And it'll actually notify you by email when they go on sale. So I've actually gotten some good finds to the website. A game that's $20, I was able to get it for $1. So, so there you go.
Cool. Nice. So Geovanny, what do you think you have for a pick?
I'm about to finish a TV show from HBO called Westworld.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Very good stuff there, because I think it shows in a great manner, in a great way, all this stuff behind the AI, behind the artificial intelligence, how it seems to be under control, but suddenly, somehow, it turns out that it is not. So
it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. So I found very interesting that TV show.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember the original show that all this is based upon. So
me too.
Yes. It was really cool to see that they came around and redid this. And the season 2 was a bit hard to really kind of follow and figure out where they were going. But once you kind of fill in all the little pieces that they've got, it's just so interesting. So I'm anticipating and anxious for the next season.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Geovanny, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you filling this in on Simmy, and wish you the best of luck and continued development around it.
Yeah, thank you guys. Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me, and also thanks for this podcast. Keep it up, because I think it's a very, very nice contribution to the community. So keep it up, guys, and thank you for having me.
No, you're more than welcome. And thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, everybody. Have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
Bandwidth for this segment is provided by CacheFly, the world's fastest CDN. Deliver your content fast with CacheFly. Visit CACHEFLY.com to learn more.